42 years ago, I begged my parents with all my 9-year-old might to get me an Atari for Christmas. On Christmas Day, however, I opened this, the ZX Spectrum. Here we are in 2024, 42 years later, and I've decided to pick up this, the Spectrum. Now if you want to see me open up the Spectrum, see how it plays, how it looks, then you just wait until after these. So with me being me, I thought why not start with the original hardware, and here we have the Sinclair ZX Spectrum 48K from 1982. Well, this one probably isn't from 1982. Wonderful rubber keys, a whole lot of symbols on there that many people wouldn't understand, and the inputs at the back. You have TV, you have microphone, earphone, expansion slot and power, and that is that. But let's put that aside for the moment and take a look at the new Spectrum, which for me at the moment still comes sealed in its box. So we have the Spectrum from Retro Games and Play On. As you can see here, 48 games included. It's a personal computer, and I believe it actually is a bit of a personal computer. But of course, with all these sort of mini devices, we have a selection of games here that are included, and I'll let you have a quick look at those there. But I'm not going to waste too much time, there's plenty of people already been online, so I'm going to unseal this wonderful little thing and take a look at it for myself for the very first time. And it's in the package really tightly, and there we go inside of the box. Now as you can see, there's a nice little cover there on the box lid representing the device itself. We will pop that open, and yes, there it is in all its glory under a nice plastic cover. And we'll remove that to have a closer look now at the device itself. Now as you can see, it's very close, maybe even identical to the original ZX Spectrum. The only thing is, this one is minty fresh at the moment. Have a look at the inputs and outputs, and for your viewing pleasure, the right way up we have power, 5V DC, HDMI, and it's full size HDMI, 4 USB slots and a home button to take you back to obviously the menu on the device. My serial number is 9375. So we'll set that down, open up the bottom of the box just to see the paperwork that comes with it, and we have a small instructions pamphlet, not a manual as such. Set that aside. The thing that I've kind of been looking forward to the most is this Crash magazine, the Micro Action magazine. It does cover all the games that come in the actual device itself. I will not spend too much time in this because there's plenty of people already showing that. Set that aside, and what I would like to do now is set the box aside and bring out its 42-year-old elder brother, the ZX Spectrum, and sitting them on top of each other. That's pretty much identical. That is spookily identical. Okay, really liking this. 2 ZX Spectrums. Yes, that's the colour as the key should be. This is the colour of the keys with age. As you can see, there's some paint damage here on the original. And yes, this is a metallic finish like the original. As you can see clearly with this one, where the paint scraped away, you have some sort of metallic faceplate there. They've done the same with this. The dimensions are absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it seems millimetre perfect. I mean, I've lost a rubber foot off there and there. Of course you have the Sinclair ZX Spectrum on the original. This is our speaker down here. On the underside of the new one, as I bump the camera, you can see the speaker is closer to up there, not quite the same place, but what a wonderful thing. And so close to the original. I might even just try and zoom out a bit so we can see both of them side by side there. The nice new shiny, the Spectrum from Retro Games, and the original Sinclair. And having the keys side by side, they're absolutely identical. This is quite spooky. I wasn't expecting them to be quite the same. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe a little harder, maybe a little clickier, but no, it just feels like that rubber keyboard on a membrane, and that's fantastic. So that's the two machines side by side. Now with this one, obviously you have to load with a tape deck, or if you had a micro drive or anything else, but I would load games on this one with a tape deck. This one, the games are installed onto it, and of course, USB stick. You throw a USB stick into the back here and you've got more games, so you can take the files from your original tapes, put them onto a computer somewhere, onto a USB stick, onto this, and you have your whole library on an HDMI Spectrum, and that is wonderful. But this is enough of the hardware. Let's have a look at the games on this, see how they play, and maybe if I get the opportunity, see how the USB stick functionality works as well. So just for full disclosure, the first thing that I discovered and was very glad to discover is that the Spectrum works with a whole range of USB gamepads and joysticks, and despite being very much accustomed to using the keyboard when playing Spectrum games, I thought for this first outing with the Spectrum I would plug in the controller from my PlayStation Classic Mini and experience these Spectrum games with one of my favourite controllers of all time. And of course, if you didn't get a good look at the back of the box to see the list of games, as I've been scrolling along the carousel here, you can just see the absolutely phenomenal range of games that they've put on this wonderful little device. I think they've been out their way to get a good selection of different genres, different play styles, and some fantastic games, especially games that I played back in the day. So now that this carousel has finally come to an end, I'm going to take a look and see what games I'm going to play for you off of this wonderful selection. And of course, Horace. Horace has got to make an appearance. I wish it was Hungry Horace. It's not, but Horace Goes Skiing will have to do. And this is going to be the first time I've ever played Horace Goes Skiing with a controller and not the keyboard. Now anyone who has no knowledge of Horace, and especially Horace Goes Skiing, as you can see here, it's just a sort of early arcade clone of Frogger that sort of morphs into a skiing game. Very repetitive, it was all about the high score. But back in 1983, that was exactly what we were looking for on our personal computers, whether you were playing Horace on the ZX Spectrum or, God forbid, the Commodore 64. Now I know my good friend Ed over at Retro Ed UK loves this game, and this was probably his first experience of 8-bit microcomputer gaming. For me, Hungry Horace will always be just slightly a notch above this one, but Horace Goes Skiing, fantastic, runs great in this little machine, and it works really well with the gamepad too. And of course I did have another run through using the Spectrum's keyboard, and it feels exactly as it should feel. So taking us almost back to the very beginnings of the ZX Spectrum, putting on a Horace game, Horace Goes Skiing, probably a good choice. Definitely gets a thumbs up from me. Now the next game that I had to test out, and had to test out with a gamepad, a controller rather than a keyboard, was of course The Way of the Exploding Fist. Now I absolutely love this game. This is one of the earliest one-on-one fighters you'll come across, just slightly after Yi Kung Fu, but what I loved about The Way of the Exploding Fist was it was much more tactical. There was no button bashing in it, there was no special moves. There was a selection of moves that you could make very much like in karate in real life, and all controlled by a multi-directional keyboard command or joystick command
with one button for the action. So quite simply, if you wanted to kick to the midriff, you pressed right and fire. If you wanted to kick to the shin, it was down, right and fire. And of course, down and fire would be a sweep, up and fire would be a head kick, and there's a selection of other moves that you could perform too. Now, I'm not a big fan of one-on-one fighting games. I haven't really put much time into them since Street Fighter 2 back in the arcade, so we're talking quite a long time ago. But Way of the Exploding Fists is just so tactical that you can't not love it. And if you haven't played this game, then I absolutely recommend you get a way to play this game. And if that way is to get your hands on the Spectrum from Retro Games, then definitely do it, because you won't have to struggle with the 9 keys that you would require on a keyboard. You can plug in a USB joystick and away you go, and you'll be playing one of the most tactically satisfying one-on-one fighters that you've ever played in your life, and that's a Generation Pixel guarantee. Now for the people who like things a little bit more shooty in their video games, I decided to try out Phoenix. Now this is a game that I didn't play back in the day. I played plenty of space shooters back in the day. Space Invaders back in 1980 was the first arcade machine I ever played, so I do have a fondness for these single screen space shooters. And Phoenix might not be the best example in the ZX Spectrum, but it's not one of the worst either, so I'm quite glad that they slipped this one on. It's not one a lot of people would have played back in the day, but it's certainly worth a spot on the 48 games that came with this wonderful little device. Now there was absolutely no way I wasn't going to assault your eardrums with the opening theme to Manic Miner and give you all a look at it. Now I know just about everybody and their grandmother has played Manic Miner, and if you haven't, you've definitely seen it before. Well, unless you were living under a rock or maybe across the pond. But after Donkey Kong, this was the very next platform game that I had ever played. And if you want me to answer you honestly, I think this is much more of a platform game than Donkey Kong ever was. It's also a classic example of that pixel perfect jumping that you required back in the day, and as the levels progress it gets brutally harder every step of the way. It is of course a very much beloved ZX Spectrum game, and one that you must play if you have a ZX Spectrum, and if you haven't, it's another very good reason to pick up the Spectrum from Retro Games Limited, because this game's on it, as you can see. So I think it's absolutely fair to say that I absolutely adore the Spectrum from Retro Games Limited. It does absolutely everything that I want it to do, and I didn't get the time in this video to go into the USB transfer of tap files, but there's plenty of videos out there that can show you just how to do that, and it's not that difficult. The biggest selling point of course is that the machine is an almost identical replica of the original ZX Spectrum, but it connects to a modern screen through HDMI, and it also has USB-C power. So it quite simply means that you can take this little baby anywhere, hook it up, play it, and you'll have a host of games to entertain you wherever you are. It definitely gets a Pixel seal of approval, and if you haven't already got your hands on the Spectrum yet and it's something that you've been sitting on the fence about, I can guarantee you don't sit on that fence any longer. Pop online, get yourself one ordered, because you won't regret this, not for 1 second. Not even if you just use it as an ornament, but it's so much more than that.
So there you go my friends, that's the Spectrum from Retro Games, and what did you think of that? Obviously I absolutely adore the little thing. It's a very authentic way to play original ZX Spectrum games on that wonderful tactile rubber keyboard here in 2024 through an HDMI cable onto a modern display. But I want to hear from you. Is this something that you would think about picking up? Is it something that you think shouldn't be made? I mean, drop down into the comments, because interaction between you and me, well, that's what makes YouTube special. It does for me anyway. Thank you very much as always for watching, and until next time of course, cheerio.